Thank you. Can y'all hear me okay? Okay, great. So there's actually going to be, we get a 2 for today, 2 for 1. There's 2 speakers, and I'm one of them. My name is Alex Kaffka, and I'm joined here by our Director of Engineering, Geoff. And we're going to be talking about energy engineering, which is a topic that if any of you are interested in energy and solar and things that are happening in that space, this is the place to be for the next hour, hour and a half here on campus. You know, what we're going to be talking about today is a number of different aspects relating to energy engineering, energy efficiency, and sustainability. How many of you are interested in sustainability? Just show of hands. Okay, great. And how many of you are interested? Oh, come on, more people than that have to be interested in sustainability. Show of hands who's interested in sustainability. Okay. And how many of you are interested in making money? Okay, big show of hands. Okay, so, you know, in a way we can talk about this presentation as being, you know, the science of how do you do well, in other words, how do you make money by doing good things, in other words, doing sustainability. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of background on myself. Geoff will give his background. We're going to talk about what sustainability means and why it's important. We're going to talk about the link between energy engineering and what energy engineering really is and sustainability. Talk a little bit about the business of energy engineering and how what you do can help other people make money, which is why they're going to pay you to do energy engineering. So a little bit about my background, actually. I started off and actually grew up on a farm in the Northeast in Connecticut, a really large dairy farm. And this was in the early 80s, and we had something called a methane digester, which at that time was a really, really new piece of renewable energy technology. And what it did is it actually took all the cow manure on the farm and scraped it into this big machine, and it would take the methane gas coming out of the cow manure, we'd burn it, and make power the farm off of that equipment. And it was actually one of the first prototype pieces of equipment out there. It didn't work very well. It was pretty unreliable. But it got me really interested in, wow, this is this really interesting closed system. How can you kind of make energy from the wind or from solar? And then really, my career actually took me into real estate development first. So I spent a lot of time in real estate investment banking, real estate development, taking buildings and typically retrofitting them. Sometimes buildings from the ground up. And that really taught me a lot about how do you talk to real estate owners, right? So when we're doing energy engineering inside of buildings that are typically owned by someone, usually real estate owners, or in this case here at our campus, it's owned by the public, but people make decisions in some similar ways to private owners, private developers of real estate. It's really kind of understanding that language. And then later on, I got the really interesting opportunity to get into solar, and from there branched out into energy efficiency and energy storage and all the different technologies that we have today. I run a consulting engineering firm, and Geoff is our director of engineering. We're going to talk with you about the different aspects of that, of what we do, and I think next up, hand over to Geoff.
Okay, so I'm going to go backwards. Alex started with where he started from. I'm going to go with start from where I am now and go backwards. So right now, I'm the manager of energy engineering at Longview Converse. There were some certifications that helped me get here. Certified Energy Manager and BPI Building Analyst and Multifamily Building Analyst. These are kind of in addition to your base level education to kind of specialize in building energy efficiency and building science. I've previously been with 3 different startup companies.
Move the computer, and I think we lost our signal.
Hold on 1 second.
Sorry. little technical glitch back online in a couple minutes.
Okay. Where were we? Welcome back. Okay. So I've been with 3 startup companies and involved with energy engineering in all 3. What you may find out if you join a startup company is you wear a lot of different hats. So various types of math and engineering will be very helpful to you when you have to wear different hats and have different responsibilities. I've been an energy auditor, a project manager, business development, customer support, and software development. Before that, I got a master's degree in energy systems engineering to specialize in energy. And immediately before that, I had my first engineering job at Toyota, the car company. And in that job, I learned about continuous improvement and establishing best practices. This is how a business is efficient in the way they produce their products. And a big concept at Toyota is reducing muda, which is waste. And that's a big part of their lean process. And I had a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering before that. And way back before that, my sense of efficiency was finish chores sooner, play more. So that I really had a drive early on. I just didn't really understand what efficiency meant. And along those lines, my dad told me when I was young, leave everywhere you go better off than how you found it. And that's really kind of the first definition of sustainability that I heard. And now today I understand it a lot better. So what does sustainability mean? Does anyone have a definition that they know of? Anyone?
Someone shout out a definition, or what they think it means.
Energy conservation. Anyone else?
Continuance.
Continuance. Okay. Reliable. That's good. Okay, so I'll tell you the first academic definition that I learned, and that is so human development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So basically, that means what we do today, we're preserving the resources that we use so that our grandchildren can also develop in the same way that we did. And one of the practical ways you can measure sustainability is with triple bottom line accounting. And this is different from normal accounting, which is basically just, evaluating how profitable the company is in terms of money. Triple bottom line accounting accounts for people, planet, and prosperity. And you can see how kind of those principles overlap. And so you can see from what I've shown you that these definitions are not new. These, they've been around since the 90s. And, it's kind of a principle that's been around since, before we had books and before, we've been sustaining life for years and years. We're just now defining what sustainability is. So Herman Daly had another definition, which is a very practical one, and it covers 3 different topics: renewable resources, pollution, and non-renewable resources, so I'll address those on the next couple slides. So for renewable resources, it means that the rate of harvest should not exceed the rate of regeneration. So in order to preserve the resource, you've got to use it less than it gets regenerated. And so along those lines, did you guys know that the energy that comes from the sun in 2 hours is enough to meet the entire planet's energy consumption in a whole year? So that really puts it in perspective that we've really got a resource there that can provide plenty to meet our needs. And so what does that look like for the US? It means that if we use just 2% of the land area in the United States, that would provide enough energy, if we covered that with solar panels, to meet our entire energy needs. So that's the size of South Dakota, and it's 30 times, so it's 1/30 of the available roof space that's out there. So all the roofs on the buildings, there's actually, they have enough space to do that 30 times over. And so another perspective is all the area covered by roadways in the United States. These are structures that we have built. As humans, we've built these over time. We only need 1.5% of the area of a road, of all the roads, covered with solar to meet all of our energy needs. So the message is, this is totally doable, and we should be doing it. So the second part of the definition is related to pollution. So the rates of waste generation from projects should not exceed the assimilative capacity of the environment. So pollution needs to be dissipated at the same rate or faster than it's created. In the context of energy, the biggest and most critical pollutant is carbon dioxide. And so that's related to climate change. So 97% of scientists agree that human activity is causing global warming. And what's somewhat shocking is the difference between what climate scientists think and what the American public thinks. So, education is a big part of this, and this isn't a political issue. This isn't about big media. This is science. So, tell your friends this is real. There's studies that this study that this statistic comes from is a compounding of 12,000 studies on global warming, and so those scientists came to a 97% consensus. So this is basically a fact at this point, that humans are causing global warming. So why is that important? Because we're rapidly approaching a threshold beyond which catastrophic damage will occur, and tipping points are more likely. So a safe CO2 level is 350 parts per million in the atmosphere. So that's, it sounds like a small amount, but it causes the greenhouse effect, which drives global warming. So we're now at 402 parts per million, and I'm sure you all have heard about, floods and drought, especially in California. I'm not trying to be too depressing, but this is very important stuff. So here's a chart that shows the temperature difference as correlated to the CO2 concentration. This is showing last year's change in temperature, so this is related to the 2 degrees C that we are above pre-industrial. This is the Arctic ice caps melting. This is what Florida would look like if 6 meters more of sea level rise happens. This is the day after tomorrow, but it could come true. And we're already seeing things like this happen. We're seeing bigger storms. California is seeing lots of droughts, as well as many other places in the world. Forest fires are more intense and more, they're happening more often. So, moving on to the third point is non-renewable resources. So they should be used to invest in renewable resources, basically. So we know we've got finite resources in the resources that we've been exploiting to make progress technologically. Those resources will run out eventually, and within some of our lifetimes. Oil and natural gas will be gone in our lifetime for sure. Coal may last a little longer, but really the thing is that if we're going to stay below 2 degrees C, we need to ramp down soon. So how do we do that? So this is one of the reasons that drove me into energy in the first place. So we've got to look at the big chunks and what we can do quickly. And so buildings in the US account for 39% of our energy consumption. That's residential and commercial buildings. So that's a pretty big chunk that we can affect. And we can also affect this issue by increasing the amount of renewable energy that we use. If we increase this piece of the pie, then we don't need to rely on these other pieces. So, what is energy engineering? It answers these questions. How can we make our existing buildings use dramatically less energy? And how can we design new buildings to require no energy delivered by the utility? And for that energy that is delivered, how can we make it renewable? Energy engineering. Energy engineering is a practice that involves efficiency. So the definition of efficiency is providing the same output with less input. So you're doing the same activity, but using less to get the result. So an example is, if you just swap out an LED, swap out your normal incandescent light bulb with an LED, you're getting the same amount of light. It's still lighting up the room enough to do your reading or whatever you're doing, but it's using dramatically less power. This is different, and efficiency is different from conservation. They both reduce the amount of energy that's being used, but conservation reduces energy by people making compromises, so they're reducing their need for energy. They're expanding their comfort zone. An example of this is turning up your thermostat setting from 72 to say 74 in the summer when your air conditioner is running. So that reduces energy, but you've got a little bit of a penalty because you may be sweating a little more. That's the difference between conservation and efficiency. And renewable generation is offsetting consumption with renewable energy. So here at Kenyatta College, we've got this big solar array. So all the power that's generated here on campus doesn't need to be bought from PG&E. So it's making the power here more reliable and more available and cleaner. So I'll turn it back over to Alex to talk about net zero energy.
Thanks, Geoff. And I'm going to actually move the table a little bit so I can actually see you while I'm talking. So just 1 second while we do that. Much better. Okay, good. So let's talk about so Geoff just gave you a background on sustainability, how sustainability relates to energy engineering. And now what I want to do is talk with you about how do you possibly make a building, a really large building, or even a really large campus like the one that we're on, consume a lot less energy? How about like zero energy or close to zero energy? So let's start with understanding first what we call that net zero energy. Let's understand a little bit about what net zero energy means, right? This is basically this is a total buzzword or a really important trend right now in energy engineering is how do we take a big building or a building and make it use a lot less energy in a way that doesn't break the bank, that actually makes financial sense. And the key thing around net zero energy here in California is that starting in 2020, so about 3 years out, okay, every residential home, every single family home has to be built so that it is not just net zero energy ready, but it is net zero energy. It's going to have to come with solar panels that face the sun a certain direction. It's going to have energy efficient windows, more insulation, and so on and so forth, right? So that's about 3 years away. All the big single-family home developers right now are completely scrambling around this. So if this is an area where there's a lot of focus for them, and going a little further out, all the state buildings, all the new courthouses, all the new administrative buildings the state is building, the new DMVs, all of those new buildings by 2025 have to be net zero energy. That means they consume. We'll get to the definition in just a second what net zero energy means. It also, the other kind of key standard and one that we're actually really focused on, even though it's 13 years away, is that commercial buildings in California, that's the high-rise buildings, pretty much every commercial building that you go into, office buildings and so forth, have to be net zero energy by 2030. Okay? So how do you make a building net zero energy? We've got a question.
For building, is that when they build a new building or all existing buildings?
Good question. So that's new buildings, right? And so there's a whole separate set of standards, which is the California Energy Code. Essentially, is getting more and more conservative, whether it's more and more progressively oriented towards consuming less energy,
Right.
and that's what drives the existing building stock towards net zero energy. It's a great question, very perceptive question. So, how do we possibly get net zero energy for a large building like this in California? And just to give you an idea about how much energy this building consumes in terms of dollars, this building, this typical building here in San Francisco is going to be consuming about $1.5 million to $1.6 million, $1.7 a year, $1.7 million a year, just in energy. Okay, that's how much a typical building like this in San Francisco would be consuming. So how in the world do you make a building that's consuming that much energy consume just a fraction, a small fraction of that? And here's how you do it. So you start off with our kind of baseline energy bill. It's $1.6 million a year in expenditures. And the first thing that we're going to look at in the energy engineering process as we design a new building is we're going to use something called daylighting. Okay, we're going to talk about daylighting in just a moment and what that means. The next process is that daylighting is essentially the use of natural daylight to light the building. The next thing that you do is you make the lights in the building much more efficient. Okay, so we wouldn't probably be using these lights that are above us here to light a new building. These would consume too much energy. The really critical piece here, another really critical piece, is efficient HVAC design, making cooling and heating the building and bringing fresh air into the building in a way that consumes a lot less energy. Okay, this is kind of a major energy consuming area, so we focus on it a lot. One of the ways that we get there is by sensing and controlling everything we can in the building. Anything that's using energy, we want to have control over it. We want to have a sensor on it that tells us how much energy it's using. Is it using energy efficiently? Is there a problem with the motor? Is it running too hot? Does it need service? All those types of things help us run big buildings more efficiently. And we optimize the building in some ways I'm going to show you in just a moment. There's a really, really cool technology or really cool strategy called demand response, which is essentially if the utility company comes to you and says, hey, it's July 5th or it's actually March 20th, and it's 95 degrees out. We weren't expecting it to be this hot. We don't have enough energy. I need you to turn your air conditioning system up a little bit. So I need you to move that set point from 70 degrees to 72 degrees, right? And you do that, your air conditioners work a little less hard. You've conserved energy. You've actually, it's like if a bunch of different buildings do that all in a row, it's like a new power plant coming online, okay? That's called demand response. And the utility company pays you to do that. So it's got a really interesting kind of cost-performance ratio. Something called energy storage. You're all familiar with Tesla batteries and what Tesla's doing in the battery storage space. There's a lot of other battery technologies. Well, battery storage is only one half of the equation. The other half is something called thermal energy storage, where we actually charge up ice tanks or move energy into really cold water and then use it later on. So we're going to talk a little about energy storage as well. And we haven't talked yet about solar, so of course we want to put solar on this building, but if you look at this building, where in the world could you put solar, right? There's really not an opportunity to put a lot of solar on this kind of building. And so there's this, of course there's an answer to that now. The answer in the United States is something called community solar, which is essentially where we're going to go out and put a large solar panel, solar panel farm, just like you have at Kenyatta College, Solar Valley. We're going to go and put that somewhere out in a rural part of the county, which doesn't, it's non-industrial, just kind of, wasteland, if you will. And we're gonna generate power, and then we're gonna virtually send it back over to our building and make our utility bill go away. Okay, so that's how something called community solar or shared solar works. And it's already active here in California. It actually started off, believe it or not, of all states in Minnesota, which doesn't get a lot of sunlight. But their solar resource is pretty minimal, but they pioneered community solar, shared solar. It's really active right now in Colorado, some of the northeastern states. Hawaii's starting very slowly to get community solar going. And California really is like in many areas, is definitely a leader in this area. We expect that community solar is going to be economically viable for the private sector in a few years. Okay, so we're kind of heading in the right direction. So let's start back at daylighting and understand kind of what daylighting is. And daylighting is using this technology we've had for forever called sunlight. Okay, and it makes complete sense. Why would you not, in a day like this, use as much natural daylight as we can coming in the windows instead of using artificial light, right? And we can turn the artificial lights off, we don't have to run them. And the important thing is we actually need less artificial light in some ways, right? The key thing to understand about daylighting and about building a net zero building is if you don't use daylight, if you don't use enough daylight in the building, you're never going to have a financially viable net zero building. You're never going to have a building that developers want to build. They'll build it if they're forced to do it because of the code, but they're not going to be happy about it, right? So that's kind of a key thing to take away from today. Daylighting is really important. Daylighting is actually what we're talking about here is lighting design, but instead of painting the room with artificial light, you're painting it with sunlight. So you have to understand it's a design skill. It's actually a design skill that's very much in demand right now, and it's kind of this really beautiful blend of artistry and science and engineering. Really understanding that well. This is actually an architect's office up in Seattle. I was just up there a few weeks ago, and this is a beautiful example of daylighting in action. So let's talk about really efficient lighting. There are a number of different ways that lighting is becoming more efficient. We all know about LED lights, right? And, 10 years ago, your flashlight had LEDs in it, and it was, someone shining in your eye, and you're just like, oh, this is horrible, and that's what LEDs look like in your home or in your business. No one wanted them. Well, now they're incredibly advanced, right? They're much better light than what you can get out of an incandescent bulb or a fluorescent bulb. So we're using LEDs a lot in our efficient buildings. And there's this really cool technology now that's called Power over Ethernet, or PoE. Okay? And what PoE is basically taking an Ethernet cable, okay, and running both power as well as data to a light fixture with that same cable. The interesting thing about that from the perspective of a developer who's making these decisions to purchase PoE lighting, okay, is that you can install this lighting with a lot less costly labor because you're not having to run like actual electric wire, you're just running that Ethernet cable. Okay, so you can use a less expensive technician to install it, lowers your installation costs, you get better lighting, you get a better ROI, return on investment with this light. And so it's definitely a winning proposition for developers who are going to be your employers. Okay, or your clients. We talked about lighting being an important category in your net zero building. HVAC is also a really critical category. How do you heat and cool and ventilate the building? In the past, what we did is we kind of combined everything all into one. So you had this one big unit, and it did the heating, and it did the cooling, and it did all the air circulation, and it all worked. And it kind of all worked like, okay. It was, it worked, none of it wasn't, it was like, remember one of those old boom boxes, and it had like, you don't remember boom boxes. It's like having an all-in-one stereo system, right, with a CD player and some speakers and a radio, and they all kind of work okay, but if you put spend a lot of money on individual components and put it together, you have a much better sound system. It's a little bit of the idea here with HVAC. Okay, what we want to do is we want to separate out heating and cooling and use radiant technologies, which means we want to move liquid, so hot liquid and cold liquid around. And then we want to separate out circulation of air from that heating and cooling. So we want to move fresh air differently than so when I may need fresh air in a space, but I may not need to heat or cool it very much. So I want to separate out those aspects, okay? So someone has to design this. Someone has to think of it in the first place and design it, and then understand the economics, and then engineer it. And so that's where there's all these different roles for people in the energy and engineering space to be working on these technologies. The other really critical thing here is, look at this. So if you use a more efficient technology, you get a 50% improvement in energy efficiency, and here's the twofer, right? You get more energy efficiency, and the cost to install it can be 20% lower. That's an infinite ROI. Anytime you bring a proposition like that to a client, they're gonna dance up and down, think you were the best thing since sliced bread. So you're always looking for twofers like this. Does that make sense? Good. This is something called, how many of you have heard of the Internet of Things? Okay, good. That's actually a pretty decent show of hands for a kind of a newer technology or a newer strategy. I mentioned a little while ago the idea that anything in the building that it's using energy, we want to have a control on that. We want to be able to modulate it, control it. Anything that is at the same time, we also want to have sensors. Sensors are really cheap. The idea of kind of occupancy sensor, motion sensor, they're very cheap. We want to have those all over the building. And what that does is it gives us the ability to create a map in some instances where people are in a building and what their traffic patterns are. And that helps us understand better, well, I need to condition this space right here at this time of day, but I don't need to condition this space here at this time of day. So I'm not going to preheat or pre-cool this area, right, until a certain time. So you can start to observe patterns with your kind of big data analytics that are behind this, really big computer systems that look for patterns, and then based on those patterns, it tells your building, hey, warm up these 3 floors at 6 o'clock in the morning, okay? But the rest of the building, you can only warm the building up at 8 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock in the morning. Same thing for cooling, okay? So it's a way of learning how do we use less energy, being smart about it, because we have these really cheap sensors, we can put them everywhere, and we have these really cheap controls we can put everywhere, and we have the ability to kind of make sure the building runs the way that it should run. Question?
Yeah, how efficient are the controls and sensors? Because obviously, the benefit of having them is the outward.
That's a great question. Geoff, do you want to jump on that?
Do you mean how much energy do they use?
Yeah.
Okay, good question. So a lot of these pieces of equipment, like small sensors and the controls, they're very low power equipment, they're low voltage. There's actually, not to get too into the weeds, but there's a alliance called an ocean, which is a line of sensors that is actually they power themselves. So they're either powered by some of the light that comes out of the lights in the area, or the sunlight coming in through the window, or some of them are powered, some of the switches are powered by the actual motion of the switch as you push it, so it stores the energy of your finger pressing the button, and then that keeps it going. So they use very little power, and then they, harvest power from wherever they can.
Want to spell that Enocean?
Enocean is Enocean.
Thank you, Geoff. Okay. So let's talk about an interesting trend here in California that affects energy engineers a lot right now, and has been for years, and is going to continue for many years, and is actually really driving the adoption of battery storage and thermal storage here in California. And that's something that we call the duck curve. Okay? And what the duck curve is essentially, let's step back a few years. So let's step back to 2012. Okay? And what you see right here is a day, actually I think this is in March of 2012, someday in March 2012. And that's the amount of energy on the grid over time. So there's 12 a.m. to midnight, so kind of 24-hour cycle. And you can see in the middle of the day, you see this kind of ramp, right? We're using more and more energy, right? This is the entire California grid, by the way. And then you can see it kind of come up in the evening, but not too much, and come back down. Well, here's what's changed. Flash over to 2016, and now we see what's happening here in the middle of the day. Why are we using, this is the net consumption on the grid. Why is this so much lower in the middle of the day? Someone throw an answer out.
Maybe people aren't home to use their energy, and then they just use more.
So the question is, this gentleman here is coming from the idea of kind of efficiency and conservation. We're not using as much energy in the middle of the day. What if I told you we're using about the same amount of energy?
The sun?
The sun. That's the answer. So what has happened is we've built a lot of solar here in California in the last 4 years. Okay? As more and more solar comes online, as you can see here, right, there's actually less and less of a peak in the middle of the day. We used to always think about peak energy. It's right in the middle of the afternoon, talking on the air conditioner, 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, right? That's peak energy times. Energy is really expensive. Well, actually, we're heading to a point where energy is going to be, the utility company is going to pay you to use energy in the middle of the day, because there's going to be so much energy coming off our solar panels that there's too much energy on the grid. Okay? So we call this the duck curve, and the reason why is that there's this big ramp. It kind of looks like a duck, right? So what's happening is there's this big ramp in the evening when people come home from work. They turn the air conditioner on, right? They start using the stove. They've got the TV on. They've got all the devices charging and so forth. There's this really steep ramp, okay? And it's an extraordinarily big problem right now for utilities, which means it's really costly, and it's also kind of a dirty problem, because we have to bring a lot of power online for a short period of time. Okay, when we do that, it means we have to spin up huge barns full of jet engines that are basically turbines. They're generators. Okay, there's no heat recapture off of them. They're very inefficient. They're like 60% efficient, in fact, and 55-60% efficient. So 40% of the fuel energy going into those engines is being vented out in the form of heat and waste, not being recovered. So it's really dirty energy. So we're kind of hitting ourselves, and it's really expensive. So we're hitting ourselves twice. It's expensive, it's dirty, and the grid gets stressed, and so it's no bueno. So we don't want to do that. So how do we solve that problem? Well, part of how we solve that problem is with battery storage. Okay, so batteries can come in that evening period of time when energy is really expensive, and they can do a couple things. They can help the grid out, okay, by taking energy that's been stored at different parts of the day and dispatching it, or kind of putting that into a home or into a business. And the other thing that it can do is it can save the owner of that battery a lot of money, okay, because the utility is charging you for how much power you're using at any one instant in time. And the more that you use, okay, you've got like everything in your house running, which is quite possible. Someone comes home, they're running a little laundry, you've got the dishwasher on, air conditioner's on, TV's on, people's using their different devices. The house is consuming a lot of energy, or on the flip side, the building, it's still 5 o'clock in the afternoon, everyone's still there, it's a really hot day, devices, air conditioner's going, ventilation's going, the building's using tons of energy. So what we can do is we put batteries in. Batteries can take the place of the grid for a short period of time and reduce the demand. So we're getting kind of a twofer there. We're helping the grid out, and we're helping our pocketbook out, because that saves us money from the utility company charges. Just to give you a little idea here, these are different battery storage technologies. This is it's a company called STEM, which is based up in San Francisco, or actually South San Francisco, I think. This is about a 54 kW system, and each of these little boxes here is about the size of a locker, like a gym locker, full-size gym locker at your gym, just to give you an idea about scale. This is a company called Green Charge. They're a pretty awesome company, and this is about twice the footprint with this little thing sticking out front as this. And you can put a bunch of these together as they have here. You can gang them together to make bigger systems. You can use one for a small business, but you could put four of them together for a larger business. Okay? And this is a Tesla battery system here, even though there's no label on it. More of a commercial, large commercial system. Talk a little bit about thermal storage. This is also called, many times we think of this as ice storage. And an easy way for you guys to remember this is to think about this as an ice battery. Okay? So what we have here there's different instances. This I'm going to show you in this example. This is kind of a small package example. But we can have an ice plant for this whole campus, okay? Or for large buildings of this campus. And what we have here essentially is a machine that sits right next to your air conditioner on your roof. And what it does is it makes ice, okay? And it fills up, these are coils, right? So it fills this whole thing up with ice. And when energy is really expensive, it melts the ice. That's how it works, okay? So when energy is cheap and there's a lot of it available, perhaps right now, say in the middle of the day, like we just saw on the duck curve, there's too much energy. The utility companies, within a few years, are going to be paying us to use energy in the middle of the day sometimes, different utility companies. So it would be super cheap. So we'd be charging up, making ice in the middle of the day, okay? And then we melt it when energy is really expensive, when it's in short supply, okay? Where it's really dirty to generate more energy.
So just to jump in there, so when the ice is melting, you're using the ice instead of the air conditioner to cool the building.
So someone has to figure this out, right? So someone had to come up with this idea, had to conceptualize it, had to design it. So there's engineering and science and economics and business, all that wrapped up in these technologies. And what's really fun is to actually kind of be able to understand all those aspects. You might specialize, like Geoff has, deeply in energy engineering, but he knows a ton about how real estate works and how developers and owners make financial decisions. And so we can kind of put all these things together and make a real difference by being the founder of a company like this, right? So that's kind of something to get excited about. So, any questions so far? Okay, question here.
So it looks like solar panels are only just going to keep getting more and more efficient and less and less expensive. But do you think that improvements in batteries are going to keep up with the same growth rates?
So the question is, solar panels are getting more and more efficient. That looks like it's going to continue in perpetuity. What about batteries? Are batteries going to become more efficient and less costly? And the answer is yes. And to give you a little more kind of a fine point on that, single-word answer, we're seeing the cost curve for batteries look a lot like the cost curve. Our expectation is that I don't have a slide not with me today, but between about 2009 and today, solar panels were like 20% the cost that they used to be, right? They've gone down enormously. We expect to see that same kind of decline, roughly that same decline, over the next, say, 7 to 8 years that we have seen in solar, similar kind of cycle. Okay. What I want to do right now is actually take you through Solar Valley and the story of Solar Valley here at Kaffka College. How many of you know about, have heard about at least our solar plant here at Kaffka College? Just show of hands. Okay, so half the room. Okay, Geoff and I used to work for the company that engineered and installed the solar system here at Kaffka College. It's one of the largest systems of its type in the entire Bay Area. And I don't want to steal my thunder from later, so I'll tell you a little bit more about it. Tell you about kind of what it does in a second. Before we could even get the system installed, we had to go through an entire technical assessment of Kaffka College. Okay, we had to look for locations on the campus that could potentially be feasible for solar power, right? And so when you do that, you're actually looking at a number of different aspects, right? And so in this instance, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, well, which buildings and where are there kind of land areas and where are there parking lots that we could potentially use for solar? And so you can see here that here's Solar Valley right here. But we also looked at these parking lots, P1, P7. I don't think we looked, we looked at P5 roof. So there, we're just the building right next door to us, right there, was a potential candidate, okay? As was this parking lot here, and some of the field, this at the time was an open field down there, so we looked at that. This study was done in 2010. Okay. But some of the things that we were looking for, okay, at that point were, do we have space? And which direction is the field facing, right? So if I'm facing north, right, so the sun comes from the south, and if I'm facing north, then I'm facing away from the sun, and I really don't want to do that, right? I'm kind of facing away from my source of energy. You wouldn't believe the number of installers that we see, particularly in Hawaii as an example, that actually install solar panels facing north. It's kind of an unbelievable thing, but we see it. And we see that in our capacity as engineers, independent reviewers of solar systems. So we're looking at that. We're also looking at something called shading, which is, are there trees or are there things like air conditioners or elevator towers sticking up out of roofs that are going to cause shade for my solar panel or going to break up the array so it's into lots of little pieces. It's really expensive. And so we're looking at things like that. And one of the things that we discovered here at Kenyatta College is there are some roofs that are good for solar, but there are many of them that are not. And you see that I think this is the science and engineering building, or I'm not sure, I can't read that actually anymore. It was pretty clear earlier, but this is a building up toward the top of campus, which you can see it's really cut up with all these obstruction on the roof. This building here has this kind of big obstruction in the middle of the roof as well. So, not that you couldn't put solar on, it's just that you can't get a nice kind of expanse of solar panels, which is the cheapest way to install it. And when you're talking about solar, you're talking about how do I make this solar system as low cost as possible, and still ensure quality. And when you have to do lots of little tiny systems together, that makes it much more expensive. So that's kind of a no-no. So we also looked at parking lots. There were some issues at that time, particularly when we were looking at this a few years ago. And at that point, the parking lot systems, canopy systems cost a lot more money. And we also just had an issue with having to restripe and redirect parking lots. And so after a discussion with management here at the campus, the decision was, let's not look at the parking lots. Let's focus on land. Let's look at land area where the highest and best use for the land is not going to be to put a future building on it, okay, for whatever reason that the management decided that. And we want to instead use it for something else like solar. And so that's how Solar Valley was selected. Solar Valley is right here before it was built, okay? And these are the other locations we looked at. This is a great, potentially interesting location, but the problem with this location, it's a bit of an odd-shaped field on the one hand. And on the other hand, it would be interconnecting. It's solar, so you have to kind of physically connect the wires from the solar system into this building over here. And this building has a very small service. It's a very small main electrical service. It has to be upgraded. We thought we may actually have to upgrade the line from this here all the way up to whatever the main trunk is in the campus right there. So it was kind of, for various different reasons we weighed up, we kind of ruled out these different locations. There's a new substation right here at the top of Solar Valley, so that kind of made that area very attractive to us. The next step was, well, golly, are we going to use something called a fixed mount system or a tracking system? How many of you know what a tracking solar system does? Human hands, okay. Well, in a nutshell, what trackers do is they follow the suns. They wake up in the east where the sun starts, and over the course of the day, they go to the west. Okay, they just track the sun. Okay, so you think that makes makes really good sense. Why would we not do that? Well, you get about 20% more harvest by doing that, or about 20-25% more harvest. But you get significantly more cost. Okay, and there's a higher installation cost. And there's also a higher life cycle cost. Typically only makes sense where you've got a really high cost of power, which we do not have here at Kenyatta College. So that did not make sense. The other, where you've got a really, really good solar resource, like in Arizona, for example, that sometimes also makes really good sense. Neither of those are true here. So we went with the fixed mount system. And the next thing was, this is an example of layouts. So fixed mount system right here on the left. This is basically facing south. okay? And then here's our tracker system, and you can see it's got a different azimuth, different orientation. This is, so instead of the panels running like this, all facing the sun, right, facing south, they're running east-west, and they wake up in the morning here, facing this way, and then over the course of the day, they track the sun and move towards the west. Okay? And this is what Kenyatta College's solar field looks like today. How many of you have seen this from the road or from somewhere on campus? Okay, great. So we built this a couple of years ago, and believe it or not, this system generates half of the campus's energy today. It's one of the largest systems of its type in the Bay Area. It is what we call, it's over a megawatt system. It's 1.25 megawatts, 1,250 kilowatts of power is its kind of peak capacity. And last year it generated about 15% more power than we had expected it to. Part of the reason why there was that we had a little more sun than we were expecting, but not a lot. And a good part of the reason is that we were just very conservative with the estimate of where the production was going to come from. And the tools that we use are pretty conservative. So we're also kind of getting used to the fact that our tools are a little more conservative than we'd like them to be. Regardless, we save the campus about $200,000 a year. That's the first year savings, and we're reducing about 50% of the energy of the campus. So it's 6 o'clock. We're actually about 2/3 of the way through. I'd love for you guys to start a little bit late, had a couple IT issues. Would love to have you guys stay if you can. How many people can stay? Just show of hands. Okay, so we've got about a quarter of the room. So we're not ready to wrap up yet. We can make the slideshow available to Aaron, and then provide. There's also going to be a download later on. So we're going to cover a couple more points for those of you that are leaving, so you can go back and watch the video. We're going to talk about how business decisions are made in energy engineering, and then Geoff's going to spend a lot of time talking about the career choices. So that's kind of the key part of the presentation. Like you guys can see it. I'll take a 1 or 2 minute pause while everyone filters out of the room.
I don't think so. Is that what you got?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Hang on.
Okay. This is a little bit like a fireside chat now. We only have about 15 people left. If you guys want to come up to the front, you're welcome to. Please ask questions. There's no such thing as a silly question. Come on up and ask a question. Raise your hand. We'll cover it. So I've got about 3 or 4 minutes left to go, and then I'm going to turn the presentation over to Geoff. We're probably we've got 15 minutes total. And one of the last things that I want to talk with you about are how are decisions made to make something more efficient or to install renewable energy, to make a building more efficient today. And the same process is used by much of the world, not all of it, but the way that decisions are made usually is based on profitability and value. So I want to put something in that sure, I'd love to make my building the most energy efficient possible, right? But what if that means that I'm spending money on getting a 2% return on investment? Is that a good investment? Well, most people are going to say no, I don't want that. Particularly if I'm taking some risk to get that 2%. Okay, so we want to have a market-based rate of return, which is going to vary based on developers. But one of the ways that we can understand that rate of return is by understanding a little bit of, and understand really the key thing here that I want you guys to think about is how the decisions get made. And if you think about when you were a kid and your parents said, you got to do something, you're like, why? And you're like, just because I said so, right? How many of you love like that? That was like the worst, it makes you so mad, right? So if picture yourself as a professional, right? You say, look, you should be doing something. You say this to your client, and you're like, no, and then you want to understand why. And they tell you this explanation. It's a financial explanation. You don't understand it. That's going to kill you, right? It's like you want to know what it is that's going to make a decision move forward, so that you're ready to convince the client in that moment when they're making a decision. Is this a good business decision for me? So even if you're going to be a technical engineer, and it's really important to understand. And I cross-train all my staff on this. Is how are decisions made from a financial perspective? Even if you're an engineer or an analyst not facing clients, you really want to understand this aspect of the energy business. So the way that decisions are made is based on profitability and on something called building value, right? So the valuation of the building, how much is the building worth? And the ways that buildings are valued here in this country and everywhere around the world for that matter is how much income they throw off, how much profit they throw off. And profit is rents minus expenses. And utility expenses are a huge portion of the expense side. So if I want more profit, I can try and get more income, or I can reduce expenses, or I can do both, okay? And it turns out that green buildings, so energy efficient buildings that are really efficient, that stand apart from the rest, get more rent, okay? So you can get more rent for those buildings, but they also cost a lot less to run. And that's the part that we're going to look at here, okay? So how this equation works is if I have $100,000 more profit, which we're calling net operating income, it's the same thing as profit, and I'm dividing that by a 5% cap rate, I get $2 million in additional building value, okay? So I've saved $100,000, okay? I make $2 million with that 100. That's what the building is now worth, more money, to $2 million more. But what if it only cost me $500,000 to get that $100,000 of savings to make my building worth $200,000 more? I've 4x'd my return, okay? Or it cost me $1 million to get my $2 million. I've 2x'd my return. Developers love this. They love it when you think about this, okay? So even if you just think about it very simply, you have a simple explanation to them, they think about it much more complexly. They love that you are getting in their shoes and understanding it from their perspective. Wins you friends all the time. So let's look at a couple examples, and I'm going to wrap up and turn it over to Geoff. So this is an example. This is the kind of decision that happens every day, all day long. And the question is, hey, should I make my building lighting system more efficient? That's the question. And what are the economics? Well, I'm going to focus you on just this part right here, right? So I'm going to spend about $100,000 more, okay, on my lighting systems than I would if I were just going to do the code, what the code requires, so to make everything really efficient. And I'm going to get $28,000 more profit, more net operating income, right? Now more NOI, it's $28,000 more profit. So I spent $100,000, and I get $30,000 back, okay, on cash every year. How's that for a return? You put $100,000 in your bank, are they going to give you $30,000 a year? No. So this is a great investment, just on that alone. But then let's look what happens if we cap that value. So I take my $700,000, I divide it by, in this case, a 4 cap, because it's a different kind of real estate, which we'll talk about that some other time. But I now have, I take my $28,000, and I divide that by 4 cap, and I get $700,000 in value. I've 7x my return. I've 7x my investment. Okay? So if a builder is going to say, they're going to build a building, and they're going to get it occupied, and then they're going to go sell it 1 or 2 years after it's occupied, okay? They've made a $100,000 investment, and then 2-3 years later, they're making $700,000 back, plus they've been making $28,000 a year for the last couple of years. That's how the economics work. It's pretty powerful, right? So you can take that simple example and you can win with that all day long. That's a winning proposition right there. Let's look at another one. So this is an example of adding solar to the same building. Okay, so how much is it going to cost us? Well, it's going to cost us $640,000. This is an awesome federal tax credit here in the United States for solar. The way that solar is incentivized is through the tax code. It's the only country in the world where we do that, but that's the way it rolls here in the U.S. It's all done through the tax code. So it's worth, about a $450,000 investment after your tax benefits. Okay, and I'm going to get about $50,000 a year in utility savings, or $50,000 a year in profit that drops all the way to the bottom line. And what's that worth? Well, I spent $450,000, I got $1.3 million, and I've, 5x my return. That's right, sorry, 3x my return. 3x my return in 2-3 years. Okay, so pretty darn good investment. If we were to look at that investment, let's say they're going to hold the building, okay, for forever, on a 30-year basis, okay, 30-year kind of average return is about 17%. Okay, 17% return on investment. That's a phenomenal rate of return. A 10-year treasury right now is trading, it yields about 2.5, 2.25, something. I haven't checked recently, but right in that 2.5% range. Okay, solar is about the most reliable investment. So is lighting, frankly. It's solid state investment, solid state asset. It doesn't move parts. It just works. Reliable system, you have it well engineered, well installed, they just work. So very low risk for a 17% return. That's how the economics work for energy. Any questions on that before we turn over and look at the last part, which is our career solutions? We've got a question.
You just mentioned earlier that the solar picture is getting more efficient and cheaper constantly. So what they mentioned is over getting buying into the solar now and having
Good
this
question.
rate of return.
I hear this is a brilliant question. We hear this question all the time. Everyone's asking, well, golly, solar's getting more and more efficient. Why shouldn't I wait for 5 years? I should wait for 3 years or 5 years. I'd same thing on batteries. Why shouldn't I wait? Why should I do batteries now? I should wait for 3-5 years, right? And here's the answer. Well, yeah, solar is getting more efficient, and batteries are getting more efficient and less costly. But they're getting, right now, solar's getting more efficient by about 3% a year, 4% a year. So there's lots of great technologies in the lab, or just coming out of the lab right now, that are just starting to kind of be commercialized, but they don't have a commercial track record, right? So the flat panel solar system that has a 1,000-year track record, basically a 50-year track record, okay, being deployed, it's the same technology, the same way they've been making it essentially forever. They just get better and better at doing it. That runs, and we know it runs. We know how it degrades over time. We know a lot about the science and the engineering, and we just know how it's going to work. So it's getting more efficient by like 3% a year. Costs are dropping. That definitely is the case. So you put those kind of 3% more efficient a year, cost is dropping. But the real answer is, if it's just getting that much more efficient a year, just in the single digits, then you're actually much better off installing it now, okay? And getting the savings now versus waiting 3 years. Okay, it's gotten a little bit more efficient. Utility expenses have gone up a little bit, but it's really kind of, you're going to, on a net present value basis, you're usually better off to invest now. That was a good question. Well, I think I saw it over here.
2 questions. One, you talked about the tax credits. Does that apply to only sort of commercial real estate development, big buildings, or is that something that homeowners will see?
Great question. The question was, who can use the tax credits? Is it just for like the big folks, the big developers, or can a homeowner use it? The answer is everyone can use it, but with some caveats. Okay, so it's let's just talk about the tax credits. The easiest way to think about it. You have to have net income, so which is as an individual you certainly do. So in some ways, it's easier for individuals to take it. If you're a big developer, you have to have very kind of there's certain types of income that you have to have in order to be able to use that tax credit. That gets really complicated really quickly. So it's a qualified yes to your question. Like everyone can use it, but there's certainly carve-outs and exceptions, particularly as you get into the larger systems that you have to figure out. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, one example of someone who might not be able to use the tax credit is like a nonprofit organization. They don't pay income tax, so they wouldn't have anything to get that rebate from, because the rebate is, you know, a tax rebate. So you can't reduce your tax any more than starting at zero already. So that's one type of customer that wouldn't be able to use the tax credit. But there are ways to get around that, and that's a little more complex. But if Alex wants to tackle it, I'm not sure if we have time.
Yeah, we'll cover that later. Government agencies also can't use it. They don't pay taxes. Any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Geoff. We're going to talk about careers in energy engineering.
Okay, so to use the energy engineering process, I'm going to go through the steps real briefly, and then I'll show what types of positions, like what roles people have in the process, and kind of what education and training you would need to do those roles. So I'll start back here so you can see the whole process. So the first step in any project is to talk to the client and understand what their needs are, understand kind of how they think about their investments, and what target you're going to shoot for when you're putting together a package of efficiency and solar and energy storage. So you've got to understand how they'll say yes, and then you can go do your analysis and present the project that you know they'll say yes to. The second step is to do the energy audit, and that's when you go out to the site and you look around, see what kind of equipment they have. You also look at their utility bills, and you understand what we call the baseline, which is, you know, in the last 12 months, how much energy have they used, and what pieces of equipment were using that energy. So that's kind of the first step in the process of actually doing the analysis. From there, once you know which pieces of equipment are using the most energy, these are the areas that have the biggest opportunities. So if you think about it as a pie chart, you've got bigger pieces of pie that you want to go after. And so that's where you focus your solutions, where you're going to come up with designs to go after those bigger opportunities. So that's what we call preliminary design. And this is, you're designing a bunch of different measures to reduce the energy use. Once you've got kind of a package of measures identified, you're going to do the financial analysis that Alex talked about. So this is related to, you know, for each kilowatt hour that you're using, how much did that cost? You're going to have to know, you know, at different times of day, for various pieces of equipment, how much that energy costs, because it does change throughout the day. So you're going to calculate how much energy you're saving, but then how much expense you're actually saving. So the savings, the dollar savings of each of the measures. And then you're also going to look at how much do these type of measures cost, so to install. So the labor and the materials, how much does that cost? So those are kind of the two basic components of a return on investment: how much it saves and how much it costs. Once you do that financial analysis, then you would present that project to the owner, and they would decide if they want to move forward. Obviously, when we're presenting, they do want to move forward. So we'll go on to the next step. So engineering and construction is next. This is where the professional engineers, mechanical, electrical, they actually do the drawings to make sure someone can go out and build it. And then someone goes out and builds it. And you may think you're done at that point. Your project is in the ground. You've got solar out there. We're all good. We can just wipe our hands and go home and eat pizza. So that's not really the case. So what Alex showed you before was a chart of some of the statistics about how the solar field is performing. So that's what we call measurement and verification. it's important, especially kind of the first year. You want to look back at the first year of performance after you installed your equipment and see if it performed as well as you thought it would. And this is kind of measuring how good your investment did. It's like, you know, going on the stock ticker and seeing if your investment made you money. So I'll just continue on. Sorry about that. Sorry.
It's worth the wait. Actually, we've got a couple, like, kind of the money slides or the real key slides coming up, so hang tight just for a few minutes while we get this figured out.
Can you tell us what interns have done? In the back, well,
What was the question?
what summer interns have done, engineering students? Because you've had 2 of our students 2 summers ago.
Yeah. So part of the process that I just talked about, the energy analysis part of the energy audit, establishing the baseline of the building is utility analysis. And so interns are very helpful with this because it's, you know, it's kind of, so energy auditing is kind of like solving a mystery. You want to know what pieces of the building are using energy. So the utility analysis is a big part of that, and that's, you know, looking at the utility bills and entering the data into a spreadsheet, and then it's kind of an advanced spreadsheet that tells, you know, what times of day people are using energy and how does it change throughout the seasons. And so this utility analysis is something that we would typically teach to our interns. They may go out with us on energy audits, so walking through buildings and looking for ways to save energy, looking for lights that are inefficient, looking for big pieces of equipment like big fans on the roof, things like that. Those are things that interns can help with. And really, it's, you know, the whole process, there's areas what that interns can be helpful with. It really depends on what they're interested in. And if we get this going again, I can kind of tell you kind of what types of majors or interests kind of go along with which pieces of the process. But it's really, an internship to me is, you'll get the most out of it if you kind of have an idea of what you want to do in the long term, which I know an internship is kind of a way to figure out if you like doing something, but it's really, you get out of it what you put into it, and so you really want to go in with an attitude of exploration. Like, if I don't like doing something, maybe I could suggest other things that you could do, and just look for opportunities to kind of try things out. It's really a way to kind of maximize your opportunity as an intern with a company if it's, you know, a short period of time. So I did a couple internships at Toyota back when I was in school, and they had a huge internship program, and a lot of the students that went into that program, because the company is quite large and the program is so big, if they didn't get a manager that really challenged them, then they would just kind of slide through and not do much work and just kind of, you know, take advantage of it. And, you know, these were paid internships. pretty well paid, and so they got their paycheck, but they didn't know what they wanted to do at the end. They probably didn't have a good motivation to go into automotive engineering because they didn't challenge themselves. And so, it's really, there were other students that really pushed the envelope and kind of did things that the other engineers at Toyota weren't even doing at the time. And those are the students that really, got the benefit of it. And are likely working at Toyota still today. So there's great jobs out there for people that are eager and willing to do the work.
This is work. Just maybe you guys can
Everyone move up.
just try and help this.
Sorry, guys.
I'm going to be down. How many of you watch that? Real question, that's right. Yeah. Everyone, I see the screen here.
So I'll go through the steps of the process, and the first line below will be the position and title of the role or of the job that you could have for each one, and then below that is kind of what you would study in school to be prepared for that job. And some of these are just kind of the foundation. You may need to specialize and do a little bit more on-the-job training to do some of these, but this is kind of the foundation.
Let me just turn it off. Okay. Sorry about that.
Okay, so go ahead. So, yeah, you probably can't read that, but
There'll be copies of the slides.
yeah, we'll give you all the slides. But so, the first part of the process, establishing the client goals, this is kind of what Alex does as a manager, and he has a role in business development, kind of going out there and finding clients, talking to them about the benefits that they could receive, and establishing their goals. These are kind of, we call them BD, business development folks. It's kind of the sales role. Also, some energy consultants have the ability to do technical work and sales, so those type of people can do that role as well. So things you would study for that are business, finance, entrepreneurship, economics, and energy studies. So one of the students told me that there's like an environmental science group, and so that may be where kind of some of these energy studies courses would be taught. Has anyone taken energy studies or environmental studies? Give me one of the classes you took. Okay, cool. So that's right. It's exactly in line with this. So if you're interested in this, then talk to this guy, and he'll tell you how to get signed up for the class. So next step was the energy audit. This is kind of putting together the mystery pieces and figuring out where things are using energy. This can be done by an energy engineer. The energy analyst is helpful. This is kind of the person doing computer work to look at data and things like that. Energy modelers. These people are creating energy models, kind of simulations of the building. So simulations are helpful because if you model the whole building on a computer, you can try things out in simulation on the computer to save energy and see what the results are like. Rather than doing a bunch of hand calculations, you're kind of leveraging the power of the computer to run those calculations for you. So you're kind of simulating a whole year and seeing how those potential measures will perform. So that's what an energy modeler does.
There's whole people built careers in just energy model. It's environment science.
Right. Yeah, and it plays into some of the later steps too, like lighting design and things like that, which I'll get into. So, and then you can just be an auditor or a rater, and these are people that are typically in the field a lot more, out at the buildings, doing the energy audit, boots on the ground, counting lights, looking for inefficient equipment, things like that. And
It's a vital role.
it's that role is important too. You can do that all day if you like it. The energy engineer role is kind of like more versatile. It can do kind of all of those things. So it's, if you're an energy engineer, you can have more of a mix of desk work and field work out in the world. So if you like that variety, then you may want to kind of get that broader education in energy, and math is very important to that. Really, analytical, kind of the things you learn in math and physics and things like that. It's really how to learn, not so much exactly. You may not solve quadratic equations and do differential calculus either, out there in the building, but it will teach you the way to learn once you're there. How you can learn these new skills. So, science and math are very important. You'll use them, but also just the way you learn is important. So, things to study: mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. There's other types of engineering too. You can do environmental engineering. You can major in energy studies in some colleges. Math and statistics are important. And then, in addition to just the book learning, there's other certifications. I mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation, there's various organizations that teach you very specific skills around energy auditing and the things that you need. And the way an employer will know that you have those skills is by getting certified in those areas. So you can learn residential energy auditing. You can learn multifamily energy auditing for larger, multi-tenant buildings. You can learn commercial energy auditing. There's many different organizations, and if you do some Googling, you'll find the ones that are the most prominent, the most well recognized. So preliminary design, solar. This is like a solar PV designer, a lighting designer, and energy engineers can do some of the early design of measures as well. This is, picking out what lights you're going to use to replace the lights that are there. Things like that. And similar engineering there. Similar engineering studies. The sustainable systems is another type of major. Even architects can do some of this work. Alex talked about daylighting. Very early in the design process, the architect is involved with designing how the light floods the building. You can use reflectors and things. The architect works along with an engineer, and they shape the way the building comes together. Financial analysis is done by an energy analyst or a financial analyst. Math and stats are very important to those roles. Economics, finance, and it helps to have some exposure to energy studies as well, so you kind of know the things that you're analyzing. Okay, we can go next. So the next step is engineering and construction documents, and this is where your professional engineers come into the picture. So your electrical engineer, your mechanical engineer, your civil and structural in some cases. So electrical engineers are going to make sure all your wiring is sized properly for your lighting upgrades or your new lighting if it's a new building. Mechanical engineers are going to design all the HVAC equipment, specify tonnage of the air conditioner and things like that, lay out all the ductwork. And civil and structural, when you put solar on a roof, you need to know that it's not going to blow away when the wind comes. The roof needs to be able to hold the new panels, the new weight that you're putting onto it. So there's structural calculations that need to be done to make sure the building can handle the new equipment that you're putting on. And these are really 4-year engineering degrees plus the additional training to become a professional engineer. ME, EE, civil, architects can do some of this stuff as well, but the heavy technical work is done by professional engineers, and they take the liability, if something goes wrong. So that's why you need that stamp as a professional. Moving on to construction. So, the people that are making these projects a reality, very important. You can be a project manager where you understand the big picture of what's going to be built, and you're telling the different trades, how they'll interact with each other. You're making sure they know to do things the proper way. PV installer, installing solar panels. Electricians are involved with solar installations, lighting, running wires, actually connecting things together. And mechanical and plumber, these people are just installing all the equipment. So you can go into construction management as a major. I'm not sure if do you guys know if you have a construction management program here? Okay. Some 4-year colleges have it. Some community colleges have it. Trade school, you can do an apprenticeship to become, an electrician, things like that. So there are ways, if you're interested in a certain thing, talk to your counselor and see if there's a way to kind of build a curriculum around that path. And then final step is measurement and verification, and this is kind of the same type of roles as are involved in the original energy audit. So you're doing kind of the same thing. In the first case, you're trying to establish the baseline by seeing what uses energy, and then at the end, you're measuring the same things. Were the utility bills lower, things like that, and if something wasn't as low as you thought, you may have to go back out to the building and see, what might be going wrong. So these are your energy engineers, analysts, auditors, and really kind of something I haven't talked about much yet is for measurement and verification, this is an opportunity where a software developer could come into play and kind of using all, usually when you're doing a project, like some of the things Alex mentioned with smart buildings and Internet of Things, you're putting a lot of sensors out there in the building. So at the end of a project, you're going to have a lot more data than you did at the beginning. And there are things you can use that data to create insights into how you can save even more energy. So there are a lot of companies out there that are sprouting up, new startups, especially in this area, tech startups. They're creating software that analyzes all that data that's available now in the building, and giving the people who run the building, the operators, new recommendations for how they can run the building. So, changing schedules and sometimes these systems are even changing things on the fly in real time. Looking at the weather tomorrow and predicting how that will affect the loads, and then you may use your battery a little differently depending on what the weather forecast is. So, kind of very exciting stuff in big data. And so if you're into computer programming and software development, this is an area where you can kind of leverage those skills to do some good in energy savings and reducing our carbon footprint. So that's an area where computer science will prepare you. So that's pretty much it, I think.
Question?
So, so the slides will be available, and you can contact us also through Aaron. his email is on the presentation, and he'll, if you want to follow up with us, if you're interested in becoming an intern or something like that, get a hold of Aaron, and he'll pass the questions on to us, and we'll get back to you. But any questions right now?
Where are the slides available?
I think, did you say when?
Where?
So we'll have Aaron.
I'm Aaron. I'm in the back here.
We'll
I'm in the
have
STEM
Aaron
Center.
let you know.
For those of you that are new to the campus, we can come talk up in the STEM Center, or if you go to the STEM Center website, there will be a page linked to the speaker series with the video that I'm putting, and then they'll just email me your PDF, your PowerPoint, and I'll put that up right next to your guys' video. Yeah.
Yep. So if you're watching this video, then just look right next to that link, and there's the slides. Any other questions?
How many of you are interested in a career in energy engineering? Show of hands. Aaron's good.
What other careers pique your interest right now? Anyone? Robots? Okay. Transportation. That was another big piece of the pie that I showed earlier. I think it's about 35% of the energy we use. Anyone else? Engineering, at least? Okay. Good. Sorry? Deep learning? Yeah, definitely. So, like what I was talking about with the software development, machine learning is one of the ways that buildings can become more efficient. We're pretty smart as engineers, but we're not always looking at the data. We don't have eyes on the building all the time, but machine learning is a way that the algorithm can become smarter as it sees patterns in the building that we may not be able to recognize, and then it just keeps learning from there. It's a great area if you're interested in energy and buildings, great area to apply that machine learning. Cool. Well, thanks guys for welcoming us. And